What's up, guys? Welcome back to a Modern Craftsman
Sunday
Monday.
night.
Well, for the overachievers, it's Sunday night.
Yeah.
Unless last week we had a technical difficulty where we didn't get that thing uploaded until Monday afternoon, but you guys still were able to listen and share it immediately. This week we have Joseph Kelly from Mass Construction Show podcast. He was a superintendent turned building inspector, turned building commissioner, turned I forget what
Building.
he
He
did in
just turned into
between.
a building.
He turned into Imagine, and that is the show, guys.
Yeah.
Um,
He didn't have much
and
to say, but he looked good.
yeah, glass storefront, Uh, but now he runs a consulting agency, code, zoning, construction consulting. We get into a lot. We talk a lot about his role as a superintendent and how that started impacting his life emotionally to the point of back pain, which we later find out that there's more to the back pain story. Um, but I think it's Tyler, why don't you dig into it because I feel like these are the ones that you really resonate with.
Yeah, I think he just started digging into, I think, life perspective some and kind of why he's made the decisions that he has, where he started out as a young man and getting into this industry and what businesses and companies kind of use to dangle in front of him to keep him on board. He realized, that that's not necessarily what he wanted in life and it wasn't exactly what was bringing him happiness, and he made a decision, to try and figure out what he can do to get closer to where he wanted to be long term, which ended up being a couple of job changes, and then simplifying life and reducing the cost of his life. And he feels that he's at a spot now where he still needs work, but he's happier than he's been. It was just a cool conversation. I think it's interesting to get people on who aren't, necessarily pitching what they do or pitching his podcast or his consulting business. And he's just kind of speaking about him, some struggles that he's had, where he is, where he wants to be, and what life looks like and happiness looks like for him right now. And I don't know, those conversations always intrigue me and I can relate to. So it's a good one. I enjoyed it. If it's not if you're more into the business ones, maybe not your favorite episode, but if you just want to get some life perspective, I think it's a really good listen.
Totally. Before we get into it, thanks to our partners, Duration Mold and Millwork. So we had an interesting conversation with Keith over at Duration Molding and Millwork when we were at the LBM Expo, and I wanted to talk about where this stuff comes from, and it's the byproduct of coal production. And I'd asked, well, what are they doing with that stuff anyway? If we weren't making boral, true exterior
Yeah.
trim on it, it was going into a landfill. And I said, well, what happens to it then? He's like, nothing.
Yeah.
So they're taking a huge percentage, and I don't know what that percentage is. I'm just saying it's huge because of the amount of product they make, and turning it into a material that then is used and has a great life expectancy. It can be installed, with it doesn't have to be sealed on the ends. It can be installed at grade. It can be installed tight to the roof. It's incredibly durable. But I was most fascinated with the fact that we were literally taking something that was trash and turning it into, I would say, a superior exterior trim product.
Yeah, I mean, you're keeping stuff out of the landfill, and I don't, it's not like that comes at a compromise. It's like, hey, yeah, we're helping the environment, but the product's so. Um,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I mean, it's a product that sits in the landfill and doesn't go away, and you can, whatever they do to make the boral, and then they can mill it, shape it, and create something that's not going to go away on the side of your house either.
And paint's nice. You know, we didn't even allude to the fact you also have the siding products. But if you guys want to learn more about it, as always, durationmillwork.com. Find out more and make sure you check them out on Instagram. Also, thanks to Reno Run, the as we keep calling it, the Uber Eats.
Beep, beep. I can't do the rolling door.
the the So we're making a Sonic brand for Reno, and we keep calling it the Uber Eats of building material. But if you want to avoid driving to the store to get that last box of screws or that box of screws that your apprentice may have forgotten, no offense to the apprentices out there, we all forget things sometimes. Avoid going back to the store. Hop on your phone or the computer and download the app. I'm saying that backwards. Hop on your computer or download the app on your phone. There we go, and get that product ordered, and save yourself 2 hours of time. I'm gonna keep talking about coffee.
Yeah,
Because they're definitely still doing the coffee until they email me and say, "Hey guys, we ran out of
no
coffee."
more
But
coffee.
they will bring you free coffee along with that order. But they're also doing bigger orders. If you guys need to take off, they'll handle a bigger product delivery. They are looking to be your one-stop shop for all of this product delivery to the job site, and they are in Philly, Boston, Chicago, and
Canadian.
Canada. Yeah, Tyler's favorite city. Um,
It's a beautiful city. It's funny, it's you were just talking about, The Apprentice making a mistake, and, Matt Weber from Grain had sent me a meme on Instagram. There was 3 guys sitting there, like construction guys, laughing. It's like super jovial staged photo that somebody probably used for, like, a magazine, and it said, "Sent the apprentice a get better soon card, but he wasn't sick."
oh
It
yeah,
was cracking.
wasn't sick, just wanted him to get better. That's amazing.
Oh, so funny. I was laughing hard at that one.
All right, guys, let's get into it. So, Joe, introduction for those that don't know who you are. You run a podcast. You used to be a building inspector. Give us the rundown.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think I fit nicely into any box, but superintendent for started out as a superintendent, got a degree in construction management, building mostly high rises for the company was Lend-Lease. They go by
Mhm.
Lend-Lease now. They were Bovis Lend-Lease while I was there. Um, Large scale, I would say in the mold of a Skanska or a Turner, that type of thing. Did that for 8.5 years. Decided I wanted a break. I enjoyed coaching basketball. I enjoyed spending time with my wife. So many things that being a superintendent on projects like that did just not afford you the time to do. There was one time where I took a month off because you were very project based, right? When you were in the project, you had to live in that project. And,
Mhm.
around that time, I also started getting migraines, which I was like, this probably isn't good for me. I think it was a little bit of, I was too young to have so much responsibility.
How old are you?
I left when I was 29.
Okay.
So from, you know, 21 to 29, I was there, but the last scope I had was probably a $30 million lab job that I was gonna be the lead on because I just finished that, handled all the lab build outs for a job for Merck Pharmaceuticals. It was a ground up job.
Mhm.
And I think because the industry is so shorthanded, and you guys probably experience the same thing. Um, I mean, this sounds like I'm patting myself on the back. It's not why I'm saying it, but if you're not even if you're awesome, but if you're good at your job and you get things done, they give you more.
Yeah.
So I remember getting, the general super on the job told me, okay, you'll have the labs and then but you won't have the BL3 lab. That's that really complicated lab. And that was it. So I had the labs and then pretty soon it was like, okay, well, we need you to take the BL3 lab too. And then, you know what? We need you to take the head block, which was this 3-story building that was attached to the big building. And then next thing you know, I had the loading dock, which had acoustical ceilings and just like mind numbing mechanicals going through it. And the mechanical coordination was just off the charts. And
Mm.
um, so I kept getting more and more responsibility. And that's the time when I started getting some headaches because I think I was just too young to have good perspective. Because you know how it is, like you guys work for clients that are probably relatively demanding. And when you're young, like when your boss tells you that, we have to be done by Thursday, like you think that's real. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And you're young and you don't get it. And like, so you're just constantly stressed to meet these deadlines. But if you've been around the block enough times, like, okay, yes, that says we need to be there by Thursday, but we have 3 weeks after that and we're okay. And I think I didn't manage that stress well. I wanted to learn something new. I was like, you know what? I don't want to be doing this when I'm 60 years old, chasing subcontractors around and just grinding. And hey, we got a fire alarm to test tonight. It starts at 7. We'll be there, 7 to 10, then be on the job site at 5 the next morning. It was just, um, it wasn't what it wasn't. I was not what I was looking for. So I took a job as a building inspector. Show up at 8, leave at 4. It was an unreal culture shock. I was like, I was there early. I'm the only person there.
Yeah.
And then come 4 o'clock, the analogy I always use was like I'm old, so this is going to ring a bell, but for the young folks, they might not get it, but it was like the Flintstones cartoon for me, where the whistle would blow at the end of the day and everybody would just slide down their dinosaurs and go home. That's what it was like at the building department. 4 o'clock, the whole place emptied out, and I was standing there, and I was like, "Where'd everybody go?" And I'm looking at my
Like,
boss.
there's
He's
still
like,
17 people in line.
"Yeah," you know. And my boss is like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Why don't you go home?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not done what I'm doing." He's like, "It'll be there in the morning," And um, but that allowed me to coach basketball and do a bunch of other things that I'd always wanted to do and wanted to spend more time with my family. And I looked at it as this was a chance to learn. Actually, let me just shut the window. I have the window open, but I think there's some noise happening.
Who's behind you, Nick? Doug?
Doug.
Sneaking in the plaid.
Hold on. Before you keep going, Joe, Tyler, did his audio spike for you like
No.
2 minutes ago? No?
No.
Okay, maybe it's on my end. All right.
Yeah, you've been showing a weak signal, Nick, at least on my thing. Sometimes it goes red. Right now it's kind of yellow.
Okay.
But
all right, I'll keep an eye on it. Just making sure we weren't getting an audio spike on the recording, that's all.
No worries.
All right.
So I was looking at it as an opportunity to learn. I wanted to learn about the code. I figured I was being paid to learn. So it was an opportunity to learn not only the code, but learn how to get a permit in the city of Boston, learn about zoning in the city of Boston. So I kind of looked at it as an education. So I made the jump. I said, okay, better quality of life. I can learn some new things. From there, I went to the AGC, which is the Association of General Contractors for folks that don't know. And then from there, and while I was there, I managed all their code committees, and I sat in on a lot of the BBRS hearings, which are the people that write the building code. And then from there, went out on my own, and I now do code consulting and education for commercial construction companies.
Going back, I just want to touch on something. Going back to the superintendent role,
Hmm.
and you say that, I understand what you're saying, like not patting yourself on the back, but when you're good at your job, you tend to get more.
Mhm.
And it's wild to think that when you're not good at your job, they just supplement you with more people. And
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
kind of obviously seeing that going into the building department, like that is, in my opinion, the unfortunate part of the skilled trades gap or the lack of skilled worker. It's that the people like them that are taking advantage of the opportunity, where it's like, I can just go be a carpenter, a union carpenter, and make X amount of dollars and do nothing.
Mhm.
And it's like, and there's always like there's a low percentage of guys that go there and like want to, strive to be better and do a better job and be the very best. You know, I just remember when I left my career, which is when I met you.
Yeah, we met. Yeah.
You were inspecting. I'm using air quotes, my building, which I was
Mhm.
just an assistant project manager taking notes all day. But I remember like when I had left, and I was the only guy on site. I was the owner rep. I was the assistant project manager. Blah blah blah. We had a CM on the job. And then I left, and a couple months went by, and I went back to visit and like say hi to the guys. And I was like, who'd you guys end up hiring, to replace me? And they're like, oh yeah, well, Mike, Bob, and Steve are running it now. And I'm like, I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "I know those guys definitely made more money than I did, and you have 3 of them running the job?" I'm like, and, at that moment, it's just like, I I immediately thought, I was like, "Was I like, trying too hard or working too hard, and it was just being taken advantage of?"
I think it's just purely they need to get stuff done,
Yeah.
and if you can be that person that can solve their problem, they're gonna go to you, because frankly, all those sections that I was telling you that kept getting tagged on
Mhm.
were other people's sections,
Right.
and they just weren't getting it done.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say that. I don't think it was
Mm,
necessarily like, "Hey, these, Nick's better than 3 guys." It wasn't about me. It was, I think you're right. I think it's, if stuff's getting done, nothing changes. When stuff needs to get done, they supplement.
Did
And
you did you didn't realize or you didn't feel overworked that you spoke up about it, Nick?
no. I never no, I never felt overworked. I was always focused on, like, what my next path was at that company.
Yeah, because I know
Uh,
my what like at Rachel's old job, she ran into that a ton where she'd start with, a list of responsibilities for that job, and it would grow, 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 and they would grow what they were doing, and she would just keep, putting they would just keep putting more and more on her plate, and she'd ask for an assistant, and they wouldn't get her an assistant. But then they would kind of put other resources towards other areas where people just weren't doing the work, and it's
mhm,
like, so is that the answer? How to get more help? By just not getting done what you have to, because getting done what you have to and stepping up and kind of handling all of your duties is almost just like, oh well, she can handle that, so we'll just keep throwing more at her, rather, and like making her life more hectic rather than trying to lessen things for her. They kind of put their resources towards where they need it rather than where the people need it.
yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know your wife, but I would venture to say that would be really hard for her. It I think the people that do that are just wired. I would have had a really hard time to let things fall by the wayside
Yeah.
as a way to hope, like, that would probably make me more stressed out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's like if somebody speaks up and is like, "Hey, there's too much on my plate right now," and you just like don't give them any sort of resources to help that and then continue to add to it, that's kind of mind blowing. And I think that is what happens with a lot of people in business, where it's like, well, they handle this, and we put this much more in, and they were able to handle that, and it's like, well, that's our best option, so let's just keep doing that.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a struggle. I think everybody just wants to get things done,
mhm.
and
But you think
it
that now, right? Not like when you were a super, that wasn't your mindset.
it well, I don't think it's my mindset, but I think it's more it's human nature
Mhm,
to need to get this, especially as a construction professional and as a superintendent. Your job is to, like, how do we get this thing across the finish line? And we often use phrases like, "We're going to drag everybody across the finish line."
mhm,
You know, work 24/7, whatever we got to do. Like, we're going to, bring in extra manpower. There's all this, like, all these analogies about how we're going to physically do something instead of more intelligently do something.
right.
Right. So what do we have to do to grind it? Like, I always got more raises. Anytime I was like, I'm getting like slammed here, they were like happily giving me more money. There was
Right.
never a fight. It was just like, get more done. Like, yeah,
It's like
here.
Joe came and said something today about his job. Give him money.
Yeah, like that was their fix.
Right.
Right. And it's so short sighted. And I think if it was managed better, I may have stayed there longer. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
But um, hey, Nick, can you see Tyler's face?
No, he always sits like that.
Okay. All right. I just only saw half of him, and you know how
No.
it's hard to see like somebody's expression. I like to kind of
Can you move your screen back?
see what they're
Or you're
saying.
on the desktop? There you go.
Oh, there we go.
I
Nice.
always have my microphone's on a stand though, so it's still like right in front of my face, regardless of where I put it.
Yeah, it's okay in front. I just was only seeing like your nose and lips, and it was
No.
a odd conversation to have. Yeah, that's kind of what it looked like. Yeah.
Um, You know,
Yeah,
the
I think that money is a very short-sighted fix, and it's a fix that works for a lot of people because most people just they're in it to kind of sustain and not necessarily grow, and they get done what they have to get done, and they they pack it up at the end of the day. So I think it is short-sighted when you're trying to build a specific type of team, but I think that that does quell a lot of issues by throwing more money at people, and in an industry where there's turnover, that will keep somebody on board for quite a bit of time longer, even though if it's not the actual right fix to the problem.
Mm. Yeah, I think it matters where you are in your career as well. Not to sound like too academic here, but I remember in college, I always loved the concept of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if someone's listening is not familiar, it's kind of where you are in life determines what will motivate you. So if you're young and you can barely make the rent, if someone gives you a $7,000 raise or $10,000 raise, that's what you need, right? If you're 60 and money's not an issue, everybody's out of the house and you have no mortgage and you're getting overworked and someone throws you 10 grand, you'd be like, I don't it like that doesn't matter to that person because it's not where they're at. They might want the opportunity to be a mentor to somebody. Somebody might want a title. So depending on where you are in life will kind of determine what motivates a person. And I think I was younger and I wanted a house. I was trying to save up to buy a house. So it was kind of you throw some money at me, then all right, I'm just going to grind harder and get more done. And now I'm going to have a house someday. So I think you really need to look at where a person's at, and that can decide what motivates them to do better or stay longer. But I don't think motivating them to grind something out is the answer. It's not sustainable. It's a
mm,
short-term fix.
I think it's also tough with bigger companies, larger companies too, where it's not that personal.
Mhm.
They're not looking into each specific case and individual that that is struggling or having an issue and what their personal agenda is, where it's just like to lump everything in, where it's like, hey, if somebody complains, give them more money or give them a title, a promotion, and they'll be happy for a little bit of time. Rather, I feel like a smaller company or more personal company has the ability to kind of gauge their employees a little more so and figure out who needs what, which obviously would create better company morale. But I think a lot of times it ends up being more work for those people where they're just like, yeah, throw money at them. If it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, we'll find somebody else, which is a shame because there are a lot of people who would stay places longer if they were treated better, but they end up bouncing around because it's just not a right fit for them.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point, Tyler, because there's not the capacity when the company is that big, you're a number on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And
mm.
we're talking about thousands of employees. For someone to understand what's going on in your family or what truly motivates you is just it's not within their ability. Their systems aren't built that way.
Yeah,
Their
and
system
I think that at the end of the day, the people that make those decisions, it goes through three or four different people to get those approvals in the first place. So the yes or no may be coming from somebody who has no idea who that person they're saying yes or no to is in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like inhumane,
Yeah.
right? It's cattle. You're a number and it would I remember even sometimes some of the raises where they would say, "Well, we can't give you any more money because you're a super one, and the super one gets paid between X and Y."
Right.
And you're like, "Okay, but if I'm doing 3 times what that
Right.
person is over there," like, whatever they're like, "All right, well, we're gonna have to give you a promotion." I'm like, "Okay, like, this is ridiculous."
Yeah.
It's like, with that promotion, that means you're gonna have to handle, 20 projects, not just 10.
Yeah. And you know what? That's a big reason I work for myself now. I j and this has nothing to do with the money. This we happen to be talking about the money,
Sure.
um, it's more about, like, the motivation thing, right? But I really struggled with that corporate nonsense meetings that were just uncalled for, like,
Mm.
"Okay, well, we can't give you a raise because you have such and such a title," and just there'd be all this absurdity, and I said, "This is ridiculous. You just hired somebody off the street through a headhunter, paid them a absurd amount of money. They're horrible at what they do, but because I have a certain age or a certain title, then I can't be compensated that way," and that's just it's silly to me. And, you continue to see that, and eventually, I just said, "I don't wanna play that game anymore."
That's
Uh,
exactly what it is, though. It's just like if you play the game, you'll be successful, but you
Mhm.
have to play the game.
Right.
yeah, it's soul sucking though.
It
It's
is.
soul sucking to play that game, um, and I kept pushing back more and more, and I think people looked at it as, "Oh, I'm being an asshole," or can we swear on this, by the way?
Yeah.
All day.
Okay. You know, look at it as like, "Oh, Joe's being an asshole," or whatever. I said, "No, like, this is foolish. Everybody agrees it's foolish, but we're all gonna do this dance because for what? Because
Right.
they say we're supposed to?" And, um, I think that really demoralizes people and forces them to, wanna go different routes, whether it's work for a smaller company or go out on your own, and, um, it's funny, as much as we talked about money, like, money is so low on my priority list.
Mhm.
I am so happy just with my autonomy. So if you look at
But
that hierarchy of needs, I needed autonomy.
it's
And
your reference earlier, with the hierarchy,
mm,
and around money and, like, needing rent and things like that, I agree with that, but I also think that the money is higher up on the hierarchy when when it is soul sucking. When you're not doing something that you really wanna be doing. Where, like,
Yeah.
a lot of these guys are in these jobs and they're, men and women, whatever, they're in these jobs and they don't love it, but they're not gonna take the risk and go work for another small company because 'cause they're making good money, and they'll just continue to take that money and be short-sighted, and it's like they are demoralized, but it's like, "But the money's there, and I'm gonna keep climbing and playing the game." 'Cause I'm with you, Joe, like, I struggled with the same thing when I had worked in that realm is, like,
mm,
it was a very much hurry up and get it done mentality, "We'll fix it later. It'll be a wa we'll deal with it in warranty," like, you just everyone kicks the can down the road as far as they can, and then they cross the finish line, it's like, "No, that's warranty now."
yep, you gotta
And
plow ahead
yeah, and it's just
at
and
all
like you
costs.
said, you gotta drag them across the finish line, and at that time it was about money for me. I was,
Mhm,
like, looking at every avenue. I was literally inviting myself to these meetings that were, like, for the guys that were in higher positions than me. I remember I went out and bought a suit. Like, this sounds so
mhm,
stupid now, but I went out and
yep,
Mhm.
bought a suit and went to this meeting, and I sat down at the table with my company. They're like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I think I told them I got invited." I was like, "I was
mm,
invited." They're like, "Oh, okay." And it was, like, some sort of, like, developer side. And
yep,
they started talking about, like, what my career was gonna be and, like, what my path was gonna be. And I was like, "Honestly, I think I'm gonna go back to school, get my MBA." And they're all like, "Really?" I had no idea what I was talking about.
yep,
I was just going with the flow and like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep riding this and I'll play the game. And I want if I'll be at the top tier because I was looking at these guys like that were working and they're flying across the country and nice cars, nice suits, and like they're doing like but they're still in construction and they're a badass. And finally got to a point where I just like I caught myself where I was
mm,
like, this is not what I want to be doing. And it was for me, it was when we hit finish in these jobs because I was always so focused on finish where it's
mm,
like the structural side, the mechanical side, I was like, while yes, it was mind numbing and talk about noises and EDM, like I remember
mm.
the coordinator would listen to electronic music on literally full blast and he'd just be in there working in BIM modeling the entire building.
Just to
His
numb his existence.
yeah, his name was Blake, so if Blake's listening to this, I feel like he might listen to this podcast, and he was one of my favorite people. But the like all of that stuff was really interesting. The structure was interesting. The foundation work, it was at a level that I've never seen before. And then it's like we get to the end and we're throwing in cabinets from a company in Texas that it literally cost $1,500 for the whole kitchen. I'm like, man,
It's
I'm
junk.
like, I've lost all my excitement. And that's when I was like, you know what? This isn't for me. And that's when I went out and started my own company.
You're really lucky that you recognized it young enough because I think part of, you talk about.
I could have chased that for a decade
Yeah, but
easily.
yeah, where it's going though is you talked about how, um, if you don't love your job, the money can matter, but it's also not.
It can control you.
Yeah, because if you stayed in that longer and your expenses got to a place
Hmm.
where you're just maintaining that lifestyle, then that's even further autonomy that
Hmm.
you lose.
Right.
Um,
But it
I was
was
gonna
like
say.
I was so removed from who wanted to be. Like I'm buying a suit
Mhm.
to go hang out with people that I don't know what they do for work, but I want their job, so I'm telling them I'm gonna get an MBA. And it's like I'd be
Yeah.
going home Googling like, what does an MBA really mean? And like, do I really need that for that job? And it's like I was doing it because I wanted to climb the ladder. And at the time I felt as though I was gonna because I dealt with similar things where, they would bonus in a structure and it was a scale structure. And I ended up getting like my boss ended up giving me like a perfect score. And
Mhm.
they wanted to retract my bonus because you quote unquote can't get a perfect score.
Oh, that
And
was
I
see, I
was
would've
like
lost my
I
fucking
was like,
mind.
"So," and they were like and I remember the conversation like, "Well, it's not fair to all the other guys in that his position." It's like, who gives a shit about those like,
Yep.
and I started making enemies in the company, and people were being promoted because I was being promoted. And it was
Yep.
like this wild thing. It's like, that what is his well, he's been here for 10 years and you've only been here for 3.
That's the nonsense I'm
How
talking about.
right.
Yep.
So it's like, yes, I see how like the money can because they offered me a substantial amount of money to stay, and it was only for a quote unquote short amount of time.
Mhm.
And listen, I'm not bad mouthing this company. Like I loved working for them. I left on a great term. I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but
Mm.
like the enticement was, hey, can you stay 90 days and we'll give you, this chunk of money, a substantial amount. I think it was like another 30% on my
Mhm.
salary. And everyone told me to stay. Everyone's like, "Do it. Just start your business later. Like that's a huge chunk of money. It would be great to put that in the bank." And I was like, "No, I just
All set.
because what's going to happen is in 3 months
Yeah,
they're
same
going to
thing.
same thing."
Yeah.
Because that piggy bank isn't empty yet. They're just trickling some change out of it.
Stringing you along. They're breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
To keep you going. And the witch is waiting in the house in the woods.
Yeah.
That's it. But no, and you're right, it's not them. It's what we talked about before. It's just how those companies are built.
Right.
They're built in that fashion, and you are really lucky that you held to that and got out. And it I was gonna say just between us, but obviously we're recording a podcast, so it's not between
It's
us
like
anymore,
7
but
people that listen to this, so
yeah. I used to listen to this I still listen to it. It's a Rob Wolf podcast, and when he first started out, I I used to listen to him when I would have to plug in my iPod to my computer to download podcasts.
I
So
don't
I've
think
been
I
listening to
even
a
knew what
long time.
podcasts were back then.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Um, and he used to always say, 6 listeners can't be wrong, uh, but where was I going with all this?
He's lucky that he got out when you
Yeah,
did.
y y yeah, because that money really can tie you, and I was fortunate enough that early on, I knew that happiness was the driver. So I tried to be hyper focused on keeping my expenses low. So I was never at the mercy of anybody so that I could always walk away if I needed to. So when I took the job and left where I was working to go to the city, I made less than half of what I was making before.
Mhm.
And I had my boss on the way out who I'd known for years, and I don't think he meant it in a bad way, but he called me stupid because he's like, "You're stupid. Like, I don't know why you would ever do that. You're walking away from something fantastic."
Mhm.
And I'm grateful to this day that I did and that I could afford that
Mhm.
I was in that place, and not that I was wealthy, but I just really, you know, watched those expenses, and I think ever since then, really every career decision I made was centered around what will make me happiest and what will this job open me up for in the future.
Mhm.
So what can I learn here that will put me in a better position for the next one to get to the place where I can have the autonomy that I'm looking for? And I've been lucky enough that those experiences eventually paid off to get me to where I want it to be from an autonomy standpoint. Not that I'm
At what point did you realize that it was more about happiness than it was about money? Is that something you always knew or something that you learned like throughout the course of that first job?
through that first job, it, it really hit home. I think I had such an aversion to the corporate environment, but when you first get into that, it's very enticing, right? Like I remember even going when I was graduating from school as you're a kid when you graduate from college, and there was companies flying me to St. Louis to interview. I'm like that was just like mind-boggling to me. Like they're gonna pay for me to fly out there and stay
Yeah.
in a hotel and pay for my meals and everything to go interview. Like that's enticing to a 20, 21-year-old. Um, and then, like Nick was saying, you start to see these people with these positions and um, the money they make and really nice offices, and you at first think that that's going to determine your happiness. And I think I was lucky enough real quick to be like, wait a minute, like that guy's not happy. He's got all this. And I would talk to different supers and be like, well, if you don't like this, why don't you just leave? And he's like, I can't. He's like, I just bought a $650,000 home. I got two kids going. And I'm like, oh, like, I don't want to be trapped.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible. Um, so from then on out, it was about how can I put myself in a place that I don't ever end up trapped. And even my last job that I left, um, I felt good enough that I had had enough experience and enough knowledge that when I would push back against, let's just call it senior management, I was never afraid because I always was like, oh, I can walk out tomorrow and have a job as a superintendent. But I could have a walk out tomorrow and be a building commissioner somewhere. It was really about trying to have that, and I can take a pay cut tomorrow, which I think is huge.
I think that that there's a couple of tough things with that today and for kids today is one, the cost of living is so outrageous for kids today where they have to focus so much on money and what's going to make them money, so they don't have to live at home so that they can kind of keep up with everyone else who has everything. Nobody you with I mean, it's all I feel like kind of intertwined based on social media and everyone projecting themselves as being super successful and nobody showing their bad side. Um, but it is true that the cost of living right now, I even know, when I got done school 15 years ago, the cost of living versus what our parents had to go through, based on, the difference between the increase in cost of living and how much more you're making in salary. It was very skewed. It wasn't like a parallel, um, it didn't raise the same. So I think that kids now and kids nowadays, they do have to kind of pay attention to that and they do have to make a lot of decisions based on financially what's going to make them be able to survive. And you couple that with the pressures and the societal pressures of what social media and all that crap does, and kids take jobs that basically and then adopt this lifestyle that's basically like putting on these golden handcuffs that they can't take off. And now it's like, I bought the new car, I bought the house, I bought whatever it may be. And they're like, I can't take a pay cut. I'd have to move back home. I'd have to
Mhm.
give up this lifestyle that I've kind of portrayed me living. And they're not willing to do that. And they're kind of not able to do that. So they get stuck in this vicious cycle and they don't realize that happiness isn't necessarily all that crap that you can buy.
Mhm.
um it truly is kind of what you make of it, and comes from within. And it's also, it's a temporary state of mind, that all those things can bring you, a momentary fix of happiness, but it's not like you're not happy all the time. um
Yeah.
and I,
It
I think, that kind of creates issues with the generation that's coming up right now.
Yeah, that's such a dangerous trap though, because I'm not minimizing and saying, "Oh, hey, it's easy." I get it. It's expensive. It's expensive for me, and even now. Um, but it's the matter of at first, yes, well, that going back to the hierarchy of needs. In the beginning, that cash means a lot because you might wanna buy your first home or condo or move out of your parents' house, whatever that is. Like, I get that, and you have to make those sacrifices. But I think where the question is when you do start making some money, are you upgrading your house? I remember there was a pipe fitter apprentice, um, on the first job I was on, and there was a boatload of overtime. He was making great money for an 18, 19-year-old, and he had an F-350 and a boat and all this stuff, and I remember thinking, like, "Is he insane?" Because what happens when he gets laid off, right? When things slow down, and I think about it and say, if he had just started banking money, imagine being 18, making, and this was 20 years ago, being 18 and banking north of 100K as a pipe fitter. Like, if he saved for 5 or 6 years and then
Right.
started spending like an idiot, I mean, then he would have been fine, but, um, so it's a dangerous, dangerous trap, and, I mean, if anything people can do to stay out of that, it's just, not that I'm perfect. I made loads of mistake, but out of anything that I've done, it's really not going down that route has really allowed me, to be happier in general, and I'd take the happiness over the cash any day of the week.
It's just tough because I think that the metric for success these days is how much money you make.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's hard to, um, to resist that and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable too, like, we all probably feel it, like, I have people, like, when I say that I'm in construction, like, you get the look, and, and I was at a party and I was talking and someone asked what I did, and I said I do code consulting, zoning consultant, I do education for construction companies. And the guy said something along the lines like, "Oh, well, it must be difficult, like, trying to teach to people that aren't really, like, you know,
Smart.
sophisticated or
Yeah.
whatever." I was like, "Do you have any idea how ignorant you sound right now?" Um,
It's like, I know a pipe fitter that made over 100 grand a year.
yeah,
He had a
20 years
boat,
ago.
but that's
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
point.
Yeah, and yeah, and he happened to be stupid, but still, yes. Um, so yeah, I think is it's fighting those perceptions, and it's willing to be uncomfortable. And when I first, started mass construction, I said, "Okay, how do I keep my expenses down in case this doesn't go right?" And I found a Honda Civic that I could lease for 99 bucks a month. And, yes, I might pull up to some barbecues or whatever, and everybody's driving super nice cars, and I'm not, but, like, I'm willing to be uncomfortable because I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to not have those things and be able to, at 11 o'clock, if I wanna go out in the garden with my son, I can go do that, and
Mm.
that's up to me. And, yeah, does it mean that I make a little less money? Sure, but, um, I'll take that autonomy over, cash any day of the week.
I wonder, if, I mean, it definitely has to come with age and maturity as well, right? Because you spend your entire youth and adolescence looking to, kind of impress girls or impress your
Mhm,
parents or make people proud, and then you get to high school and it's based on what college you get into and what your grades look like and what your GPA is and if you got scholarships, and then it's the first job and what firm hired them and what their starting salary is. And
mhm,
at what point are people, even now, I'm 35, and most people in town and everything else, it's like based on what type of car you drive and how big your house is and how much, your household income is and what you can afford. And I'm getting to the point at 35 and having an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old that I'm realizing I want to be financially secure and I want to give them an upbringing that they don't feel underprivileged. Like, I don't want them to feel as though they can't fit in if they want to, or, that they don't have what other people have, that they can earn that if they want that. But I, uh, I also I don't want to hand them everything. But I'm getting to the point now where it's like, I'm comfortable not having everything and really having what we need and enjoying what we do have. And I'm less concerned about, making money to be able to have shit as much
Mhm.
as making money to be able to save it and to be able to, give them a life they deserve and to have like time. Where it's like, for me, the money is one thing, but having the, like you said, the autonomy or the independence on a random Thursday to be like, I don't want to work today and be able to do
Mhm.
that. That's been far more valuable and rewarding to me than any lump sum of money that I've ever made.
Yeah, that time, autonomy, and then I would say even security, like, because that's what it is, right? You're secure enough that you can take that day off and realize that, we all work for ourselves and we eat what we kill.
Yeah,
So if we're not hunting on Thursday, we're not getting paid. And I think once you get that security that comes with both reducing your outflow of money and being able to get a little bit of a nest egg, you then have the happiness that comes with that stuff. I mean, a great example of it is in just how like all these things really are a dangerous trap. It's funny, like every year we get this little advent calendar from my son, and because we don't want him to have candy, we get this Lego one. And each day he is just thrilled to go down in the morning and open, and it's a little tiny Lego piece. It's not a big spaceship, it's just something simple. And every morning it was like the most wonderful thing in the world. And then we started getting all these presents coming in and said, rather than having them all open on Christmas Day, let's have them start to open some of them now. So we started opening presents. As soon as we started opening presents, the next morning he wasn't running to the advent
yeah,
calendar, right? And he opened it, he put it out, and he never even put the thing together. So it was just a good way to say, oh, good way, like a good example of, more is not better. He was happy with those. He was
yeah.
stoked with those little things, and then it was ruined because he got flooded with all this overload of crap, and then he wasn't happy with that anymore. So it's like, it, as much as anyone, if there's a lot of young folks that are listening, as much as you can reflex and kind of control that, I think it really helps put you in a place that Tyler's talking about where he can take a day off and not chase those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken me at this point, at 35, and you hear people say it all the time, growing up, um, that money can't buy you happiness and, that your time with your family is fleeting and you have to enjoy it and it goes fast and all of you can't take it with you. And up until this point in this past year and some circumstances that we've gone through that have made us realize there's more important crap, it never really clicked. Like, you always hear that stuff and it makes perfect sense to you, but it's almost unrelatable. And when you get
Mm,
to the point where you can actually relate to that and that makes sense, and you have to, for me, I had to be financially secure enough to not sweat doing that as well,
Mhm.
right? So there is
mhm,
like a financial aspect to that where, a couple years ago it's like, well, I'm going to take off on a Thursday and tell these customers I'm not coming in last minute, and then they're not going to give me a good review, and then I'm not going to get business from it. Where right now I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I took a day off for mental health to be with my family, whatever it may be, just like you guys can do that at your job. If you now had a bad experience because of me, that, like, then I'll just find somebody else to work for. but it takes a lot to get to that point, and I think it's self-confidence, it's esteem, it's being financially secure and getting to the point in your life where you're not looking to necessarily impress everyone.
I to add to that, sorry, Joe, like, just to add to that, the side of being, like, financially free or, money doesn't buy happiness, I while I agree with it, the part of about it that I disagree is that what money does do is it allows you freedom, and you kind of wrapped up what you were just saying with that is, you know, that doesn't mean that you need to make a lot of it, but in the society that we live in, money is our currency for freedom. And the more money that you have tends to equal the more freedom that you are allowed to, or that you have the opportunity to give yourself. Some don't, but
Mm.
with little money creates little freedom, and you're strapped by that. So I think that's important to note. And like going back earlier, it's like everyone defines success as like how much money they have, and it's you know it, oftentimes it is, but along the same lines, it's about the freedom, and I think that I guess my point is like there is absolutely a financial aspect of freedom, which freedom then creates happiness because you are free to do what you want, whether it's gardening with your son at 11 o'clock in the afternoon, or taking a day off for mental health, or whatever the case is. It's the sooner that you can figure out how to create personal freedom, again, doesn't mean that you're making $1 million a year. You could be making $10,000 a year, you know, but living the lifestyle that is paired with that allows you to have that freedom.
Yeah, I think it really boils down to security and what you just described, right? Like, is there's a huge financial component to security. Some of that is how much you're making, and then how much you're spending.
Hmm.
And then I think the other element to security is your willingness, like we've all been that way, right? Which is we want praise from the outside. And the minute you can kind of, in the way society is, you get praise for being really good at what you do, or making a lot of money, or having a nice car, or having a lot of followers. And if you need that validation, then you can become as quickly a slave to that as you are to money. So I think having the security in yourself and the financial security gives you that ability to not worry about what the neighbor's driving for a car, and not have to run over on a Friday night to bend over backwards for a client because they're being unreasonable, right? You have that security that, no, I don't need to do that. And if that client wants to walk away, that's their business. So, and that's not easy. I'm not claiming it is. Like, it took a long time to get to the place where I was not looking for validation from outside people,
Hmm.
or not feeling like embarrassed if I didn't, meet some standard. So it took a little while, but like, to me, it's gold. It's an unlock um,
Where in
to
your
being
career
happy.
were you when you realized, like, when you felt as though you've let that go?
Eh, Late 30s, I really let it go
Were
because
you a building inspector still?
um, just after that, just after that, um, because I think I had enough experience that I knew I could always have a job, a
Mm.
lot of different jobs if I wanted. So that was the first one. And then, like, taking the step out of the corporate thing and spending the time in the building department and saying, "Hey, I'm happier not killing myself." And I always worked hard. I would just do stuff outside of work.
Mhm.
I am far from not a hard worker. I definitely do too much, take on too much, doing the podcast. I spend a day and a half a week on the podcast on top of my day job. So this isn't about not working. It's just more about working on my own terms. But yeah, I would say after that, I felt secure enough that from a job perspective that I knew I was always going to do fine from a work perspective. And then I think, like Tyler said, with age, you just kind of realize um, that it's not the end of the world if people aren't accepting you into their clique or singing your praises.
Mhm.
And I think if you can have that kind of self confidence, then it becomes a lot easier. But I'm not saying I've got it all figured out. I'm still working on it,
Mhm.
but I just now pay more and more attention to that rather than trying to achieve more in the business. And oddly, I think when you do that, you do achieve more on the work side because you're just more at ease.
Yeah, I think even that, that mindset does transition into having a healthy business mindset too, where you're comfortable and confident enough in your services and your product that you can kind of gauge and sense an unrealistic customer and detach yourself from that rather than being, immersing everything that you have into making that customer happy. Where it's like, I know that I do a good job and I know that I treat my customers fairly and that I'm doing the best that I can. And if somebody's just unhappy, like that's not on me anymore. I'm not going to spend the next 6 weeks here losing sleep and figuring out how to make this person happy where they're just not happy. It has nothing to do
Mm,
with me, but that takes a long time of being in business to be able to say, like, hey, I'm fulfilling contractually what I agreed to, morally what I kind of stand for, and I'm doing the best job that I can with the resources that I have. And this person's just not being fair and realizing that that's not something that you have to own.
mm,
That took me a long time as well. And I think that that's kind of the same type of mindset that I guess, it happens personally. And then I think that it ends up kind of manifesting itself through business as well, where it's like, I don't need to kiss every one of my customers' asses. Like, that's not what it's about. Um,
mm.
I don't kiss my own family's ass. So, like, why am I spending all of my time and energy trying to make my customers happy? At the end of the day, like, if I die tomorrow, my customers are just going to go find another contractor. My family can't go find another dad.
Yeah. Yeah, when did you it's funny, I was it's you beat me to the punch. I was gonna ask you, like, did you get to the point where you felt like you understood yourself well enough to understand your flaws? Because I think that was part of it with me. Like, I eventually realized that I am a people pleaser
Yeah.
by nature, and that caused me a lot of stress because I was just constantly trying to keep everybody happy, and just it burnt me, right? And but that's why you end up good at what you do because you want everybody happy and you're working really hard to keep everybody happy. Did you feel like you got to a point where you recognized who you were?
Yeah,
And
but I think it started early for me. I think around like the age of 23 or so, I started kind of reflecting internally on who I was and trying to gauge that. And not that I really made that much headway at that point. And I feel like in those years are such formative years that you are changing so much. But I think that I probably started realizing, the issues that I have and the personality type that I have and what it lends itself well to and what it does not lend itself well to. And although I didn't have the answers and I didn't necessarily go about it the right way all the time, at least I was aware and kind of cognizant of that. And I think, the past 12 years, um, I've made forward progress, and it's if you look at the big picture, some years weren't as much as others, but I think if you look over 12 years, like the self growth and everything, I hope to continue along that path. But I would say the last year or two have been the biggest for me, especially with COVID hitting and then like being overworked and customers kind of having unrealistic expectations of things and me not changing. I'm still doing things the same way that I did.
mm,
Um, and I think, I worked myself so hard that I was getting sick, and having to go to the hospital, and not really understanding why. And it kind of took that twice last year to be like, "What the hell am I like, what's this all for?" Where
Mm,
and then, with my wife being home and working from home and everyone's schedules, she's asking me if I could leave work to get home and do this to help with the girls because she has a meeting, and, like, I don't know how many times over the past year and a half I've been like, "Nah, that should," and she's like, "No, it's fine. If you can't make it work, I'll make it work." And then if I'm home, if a customer were to call me and ask me like, "Hey, I need something done today," I would always just drop what I had to do and do it, and there'd be no
mm,
questions asked. And I just had this realization where it's like, I'm putting my customers and my work before everything in my life.
mhm.
And like, those customers are only there because they need something from me. Like, I think that, I do have a good personal relationship with a lot of them, but if not all of my customers, if I stopped working for them, I would ever hear from them again. It's because
Right.
they need something from me. And like, I'm fine with that, but it's not a friendship in the general like sense of the word. If I moved away, I probably wouldn't hear from these people.
Mm,
And I realized that I'm putting these people in my life before myself and before my family. And I was just like, I'm kind of done with that. And I can still make money and just not have that mental anguish and that anxiety to make everyone happy and put them before myself and my family. But I think it was probably the past year and a half, 2 years that I really was like, fuck this.
yeah, I listened to that episode you did. It was excellent. Um,
Thank you.
and yeah, and it's funny, I'm gonna be completely candid, I don't listen to a lot of your episodes. I'm kind of a person that looks and will pick and choose
Yeah.
what I do because, I'm not in your wheelhouse, right? I'm not doing residential carpentry. I'm not doing residential construction. I don't love carpentry. So, like, I like to look at the stuff you guys put out, and
Yeah.
every once in a while something strikes me, but that's not my world, right? I'm in the commercial construction world, but I can really relate, oddly enough. It might have only been like a month before I did a similar episode because I was experiencing the same thing where I was having physical pain that was symptomatic of stress.
Yeah.
And, I learned in the past where, like, I had a tie with back pain that I had that was tied to, like, stress and trauma and all this other kind of stuff, not to get too deep, but and I learned that, hey, what mentally is happening affects me physically, and I was able to get rid of the back pain and, I could barely pick up my newborn son at one point, and, now I can do cartwheels and I'm out there and I'm jumping up on 4-foot walls just now when I was walking around the block before we did this, and, like, I'm fine, but it was all by, like, doing mental work. So, I really, relate to what you're saying about how that stress can result in physical pain, and that I find it really helps because the physical pain can almost be a notification that something's wrong.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I know I just bury everything. I'm kinda everything's fine, nope, like, oh, it's like someone just got murdered or whatever, and then my best friend, like, "Yeah, I'm sad, but alright, what do you gotta do? You gotta keep moving forward and, like, can't get dragged out." Like, just bury it, bury it, bury it, bury it, bury it, but
And then
it
all of a
doesn't
sudden your
go
back
away.
hurts.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
all of a
like, "What's
sudden,
that? What
like
is that?"
yeah, I'm like, "Oh, I can't sit down, I have to stand the
Mm.
entire day." Like, that's not right. Um, so it that stuff, it's funny, I did a podcast with Mike Fish and this guy who's an accountant for him. He owns Delbrook Construction, and they did a wellness challenge at their company. And one guy, and it was over a 2-year period, but they came out twice. He lost 120 pounds. And so much of our conversation centered around first we were talking about how wellness should be part of the business world.
Mhm.
Um, but it just quickly showed how, like, being healthy and mental health and eating well and sleeping and stress management really allowed him to be a better father, and then therefore a better employee. And at the end of the day, it all stemmed from, like, a mental place. Like, you gotta figure that stuff out. The technical stuff, we're everybody's probably pretty good at it, you know? But if you can get that mental piece figured out, then you can thrive. I didn't set goals until last year. I've been, like, slowly learning about, how the mindset is important. Like, I have to recognize that I am a people pleaser. I need to recognize that I ignore everything and bury everything and nothing's ever wrong. And I have to say, "Hey, you know what? This is wrong." And I don't have to please everybody. And, you can be successful and you don't have to kill yourself to be successful. And how can I do that? I can do that by, setting goals. But so much of it is mental. I think that mental piece is what will separate people from the pack.
Yeah, I think that society as a whole right now is basically like put everyone in survival mode where you don't especially in our industry, we're all problem solvers. Like that's all we do every day
Mhm.
long, and you will spend nights awake solving problems in your head or potential problems in your head. And then it's like, how much time have you actually spent trying to sort out some of your own internal problems or issues where like you're just putting all of your time, energy, and resources into all of these external things that have nothing to do with your kind of internal ground and making peace within yourself. And I'm so far from that, but I think that the way that everything is right now and the way that our society is, and the way that people kind of portray themselves, you're basically trying to keep your head above water so many days, and it just seems as though like you're treading water and you're never really making progress. And I think that if you can find something in your life or your business that can kind of make you feel as though you're finally standing on something and you don't have to tread water anymore, that mental health, or that mental clarity can actually make your physical well-being so much better. I think that they're definitely both interconnected, but if you look at, mental health issues and the physical results of that are typically way worse than, the other way around. And you can look at drug addiction, you can look at alcohol addiction, suicide, insanity, everything, it all so much of that, and I know so much of my life and the way that I act and react and treat people, it all comes down to how I'm feeling internally and what my anxiety level is like. um
Mm.
Even with the kids, like it gets to 9:30 at night and I just like I can't take any more of them yelling and fighting and screaming, and like I have patience for it all day, but when it's 9:30 at night and I'm like they should be asleep, I kind of lose all patience and my anxiety level just raises, and I like have to have a serious conversation with them where it's like, "Hey, I'm not feeling good right now. I need you guys to tone it down." And this isn't just like, "Hey, you're making too much noise." Like you're really making me feel uncomfortable. And
Mm.
I kind of have to recognize that to be able to be a good dad and treat them well, or else I'm just going to blow up and be like, "Get the fuck to bed." Like it's 9:30 at night. You've been up right now, like it's just too much for us, and it's tough, but I kind of do recognize those things within myself where it's like you have to find some sort of ground for yourself that really puts you on a basis to kind of get up every day and do what you have to do and remain level headed.
Yeah, because if not, you end up in just a vicious cycle. Because you blow up, right? Then what happens? You go to bed, you don't sleep well because 'cause you're fucking amped up, and then you don't get enough rest, so you're hitting coffee and a fucking donut in the morning to get yourself going, and then you're spiking your blood sugar. And then you're short-tempered and you're on highs and lows from the blood sugar, and then it's just a vicious
I
cycle.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
understand why we do it. Like,
It's just because we've like normalized it.
but I know that, but like for example, like for me, if I wake up and I go to the gym first thing in the morning, my day, I've never measured it, but exponentially better. I
Mhm.
get more done. I'm more focused. I feel better. I feel a sense of accomplishment. I feel energized. I and then I'm reaping the benefits because I'm in shape and like I
Mhm.
think I look good, like the long term benefits.
Yep.
But it's still like this morning I wake up and it's like, all right, it's 4:30. I could go to the gym. Now I'll sleep. And it's like, why would I go to sleep? I know sleep's gonna make me feel worse. And I know that my day isn't gonna be as productive. I'm on my second coffee.
Mhm.
Like, and and we, we're sitting here talking about like the mental side of it, and that's what it is. It's I think that the mind I had this conversation the other day that if I were to ever get sick, that I'm convinced that I can cure myself by telling myself that I'm gonna beat this.
Yep.
And whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I'm not going to allow myself to believe it's not. Even if it ends up killing me, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm gonna beat this. I'm not, because I think that, unfortunately, we just get to a point where we just kind of accept our fate. But going back, it's like we constantly go through these cycles of like all these things I know I can do are gonna make me feel better. But I'm gonna eat the donut instead.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm glad you went there because I already flirted with the edge of the fucking craziness, but um,
Well, you listen to crazy noises that
yeah,
probably heal your back. So
yeah. Um, there's a guy, Gabor Mate, and
say that again. Sorry.
there's a he's an author, but he's a doctor, Gabor Mate,
Gabor
and
Marte.
yep, he wrote a book called When the Body Says No.
Mhm.
And you could also look him up. He has quite a bit of YouTube content, but him and this other guy, Dr. Sarno, um, both had the same kind of theory. And it's the stuff that I read that was able to, for me to heal my back pain,
Mhm.
as well as a bunch of other pains that I had mentally. So I think what you're talking about is spot on. But in Gabor Mate talks about how he would see um, even different diseases that matched personality types. So people with autoimmune disease, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or MS, had certain personality types. And after I was able to heal my back pain mentally, I started digging in more, and I picked up his book and I read it. And my dad has had rheumatoid arthritis since his mid 30s. Like, his hands are all deformed, and he's like, it's it's been um, a rough sledding for him. Um, but I read that book, and it described under the chapter that covered rheumatoid arthritis, it described my father to a T, what his personality was, and it was amazing, and it was like it actually like physically affected me. I remember like getting kind of like the
Mm.
shakes while I was listening to this because I think it just kind of was unlocking um, the idea that, hey, wow, this is all connected. And like we do, his whole concept is you get pain. And this is Sarno's concept too, is you get pain to avoid the mental pain you don't want to deal with.
Mm.
So when we'll go there. So my sister um, got cancer. She called me the week my son was born and said, "Hey, like I knew about this before, but I didn't want to ruin the birth, and but it's not going to be long, so I don't want to wait." Um, and I went out and I got this crippling. I went out. She was in San Diego. I went out, stayed at her house. I stayed on like a Tempur-Pedic type mattress, and I woke up and I was like couldn't move, just locked up, and um, and there's like that's a kind of the obvious tie. There was a lot more to it, but I didn't want to think about my sister was going to die. So his thing is your body will give you some other pain. And if you think about back pain, if you've ever had it, I don't know if either of you guys have.
Mm.
Can you think about anything else when you have back pain?
No, I always thought it was like people were bullshitting about back pain until I actually hurt my back, and it was like, yeah, I physically can't move.
Yeah, and that's all you can think about. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna be careful how I pick this up
Mhm.
because if not, there's gonna be this knife in my back, and that's all you're thinking about, so you're not thinking about, these other stressful things or traumatic things that you don't wanna think about. Um, so if you're of that same mind, like, I would check out Gabor Mate. He's amazing. He also talks about addiction, and he said all addiction stems from trauma, and he says the, um and I'm gonna butcher it here because I didn't think we are gonna go. I didn't do any homework on this, but he says, um, "The addiction is not the problem. It's the person's attempt at solving the problem."
Mm.
And he said that he worked in Vancouver, British Columbia, where, like, the problem we're having here in Boston with drug addiction and all that kinda stuff, it's tenfold there, and he worked in that place, and he said he did not see anybody that was drug addicted that didn't have trauma, whether they were sexually abused or whatever it was. He's like, it all stemmed from trauma, and this was their way to numb the pain. And he goes, the only way you fix the addiction is to solve the pain. So that's where he really kind of learned about the connection, and then he really started studying it. But um, it's fascinating stuff, and I've lived it firsthand. So I can say you might read it and be like, oh, this is fucking nonsense. This guy's fucking a quack.
Yeah.
But it's been true in my experience.
But, like, to relate this back to work and our
Yeah,
industry.
we're way off of construction now. So
That's okay. But to relate it back, it's like it's the same way I feel about, when I say I wanna do something, when I wanna build homes across the US, when I wanna, you know, whatever it is, I refuse to believe that I can't do that. And because I had this conversation with my wife years ago, and I'm getting feedback. Are you guys?
Yeah.
mm-mm.
Yep. Your internet's better now, but I am getting some feedback.
Jody, is it coming out of this your computer or something? Did it change?
I haven't moved anything.
Alright, I'll
Let's
keep going.
see.
Um, the we had this conversation, we were talking about restaurants, and, I had, like, casually, well, not casually, but, like, I was like, "If I ever opened a restaurant, I'd compete with that restaurant, like, the best restaurant in the neighborhood." She's like, "Nick, you don't know anything about restaurants." I'm like, "It's not about knowing about the restaurants, it's the fact that, like, I wouldn't stop at anything less, and maybe I would
That's
fail."
not what you like. Yep.
Like, maybe I would fail, but it's that, like, I would never go into it where it's like, you know, I just think David Goggins is such a hot topic right now. A big ultra
Mm,
marathon runner, like, a hard motherfucker, as he says. And that's his whole book talks about mental toughness and callousing the mind. And like, when you're in pain by doing something physical, you're only at 40% of your capacity. Like, just talks about all this stuff. And it's like, really? It's like, so then I'm like out for a run and it's like, I'm like in physical pain. I'm like, "Pff, I got 60% to go." And it's like, who knows what, like, where did that number come from? But now it's like tricking my mind into thinking that this is nothing. Like,
mm,
you're just beginning to experience it. And I think that, like, in this industry, you know, and let's relate this right back to being working in, commercial construction and being driven to to deliver, get something across the finish line. It's like, because we're led to believe that that is the right way to go about building, the right way about running a company. And those that are able, I don't want to say that are able to escape it, but like those that don't want to be there and are able to escape it are fortunate to re-establish that path.
mm. Yeah, to go a little backwards to David Goggins, I feel like I'm vacillating between David Goggins and, like, trying to be zen. And, like
Because David Goggins is like like the that's so they're like
complete
yeah,
opposites,
complete
right?
opposite. So I'm like, I think in the middle is almost just like a normal ass person, but
No, no, I think,
but
like
I know what you're getting at.
yeah, like, I think, you need to, like
Be a hard motherfucker, but be really calm. Because
yeah, like, go back.
you're a calm, very like level-headed person. Like when you talk and when you can kind of communicate what you're, what you got going on.
Yeah, and I think um, to balance the, like, I am gonna work as hard as I can and be the best that I can possibly be and set goals and tick those goals off and dominate or whatever you wanna say, like that David Goggins kinda thing. But at the same time, I wanna be not so hung up in that, that, um, I keep perspective. I mean,
Right.
I was the type of person I'd play solitaire with my grandmother, and I'd fucking be angry if I lost, right? Like, it's just, like, I wanna win. I like just how I'm wired. But at the same time, I wanna be like, "This isn't that important to
Mhm.
me." Like, yes, I'm gonna be the best that I can be, and I'm gonna accomplish all these goals, but it's not that important to me.
I think it's like Conor McGregor, right? Where, he goes out and he's like, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win, and he doesn't win. And he moves on.
Mhm.
He's like, "Whatever." Like,
Yeah.
he he doesn't it's not that his world ended at that point. He's like, "Whatever, I still made $100,000,000. So in my mind, I won. I got knocked out, who cares?" But then he goes out and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna kick that guy's ass."
Yeah, he runs his mouth just
And
all
he
over
runs his
again.
mouth again, and it's like it's the same thing where it's like he's not going why would anyone go into something where they're like, "Yeah, I know, like, I'm not gonna get this I'm not gonna get this done right." And again, relating it back to what we do, it's like, why would you go into a project or a job or a career of like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna like, it's gonna suck, but I'll just do it." It's like, well, what if it didn't
Ye
have to suck? And like, what if you said, I'm gonna be the best superintendent that that company ever had. I'm gonna be the best builder that, the world has ever seen. Just say it. I don't like and it sounds ridiculous, and I'm sure some people are listening and it's like, dude, cut like get off the hippie shit. But like
Mhm.
it's not. It's you're the mentality of what you want in life is often overshadowed by what everyone else is telling you it should be.
Yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast today, um, and the guy was on there and he started kind of digging into how most of the time people are setting their goals based on rules or laws, that
Mhm.
kind of society creates, where it's like, why aren't you setting like your goals and what you want to do, and those kind of whatever your expectations are for your life, for your business, why aren't you setting them based on your beliefs rather than like what people say it should be? um and he was basically saying that, like, if you're setting, that my business should do 5 million after 5 years because like that's just the rule of thumb, you're gonna it's gonna be so hard to find motivation to kind of get to that. But if you base it on like, hey, I believe that we can do 5 million in sales after 5 years, like, you're going to set all of these goals and this motivation based on what you think in your head, and you're going to be able to validate that and support that, because that's what you truly believe inside, and it's not just this rule that somebody made up. And it was an interesting conversation. I think that, like, some of those lines blur back and forth. But I ended up like taking notes on the conversation some because I really wanted to dig into it more and kind of dissect it, because listening to it, it was just an interesting conversation where it's like, yeah, a lot of times I think that we do set our goals based on what somebody else said we should be doing, or like what those principles are, rather than what we believe we can do for ourselves. And sometimes, those societal standards or laws are actually hurting us because they're lower than what we believe we could do for ourselves. And then, like, you have there's nothing really that's leading up to that that's going to get you there if it's just like, you need to be doing this because this is what everyone else does, where it's like, well, you know what, I just believe that I can do this, and this is how I'm going to get there. And then you could find that self-realization, that motivation to get there, because it's all based on your beliefs and it's not on what somebody else told you.
Yeah, did they get into I forget who's kinda coined it, but did they get into the, like, to know your why? Was that part of it too, to, like, why are you going for that?
Yeah, I think that kind of is all, kind of intertwined there, where like, if the beliefs are like the why is a part of that belief, right? Where like if you believe that you can do something, what's giving you what's telling you that you can do that? Is because you did this and this, or is it because you have this goal 10 years from now to be able to do this, where you're creating this game plan and this sequence that's going to get you to where you believe that you can be, and that's based on that's based on why. That's a big part of the reason that you're kind of going off of those beliefs rather than just like here's the norm or here's what everyone says that you should do. It was an interesting conversation. Like I said, there was a lot of lines that were kind of blended between the two, but it was one of those things where I listened to and I was like, I kind of want to listen to that again because it made a ton of sense, and I really want to like dissect that more, um, and kind of relate it to what I've done in my own life and currently what I am doing, because I think a lot of the decisions that I make in life are because I saw somebody else do it. Or
Mm.
because, that's just like the standard, or because somebody said by the time you're this age you should have this. And it's like, well, maybe I should scrap all that shit and throw it out the window and just
Yep.
figure out where I want to be, why I want to be there, and what I believe like will kind of maximize the full potential I have as a human, as a father, as a husband, and then figure out how to get there rather than kind of what everyone else expects of me.
Yeah, those things are just arbitrary,
Yeah,
right? That's an arbitrary number, 5,000,000 at 5 years. Completely arbitrary. Says who, right? And for what? And then what? What's year 6,
yeah,
Right.
right?
mm,
Like, that's, uh, paraphrasing a little bit, that's playing somebody else's game,
Mhm.
and, uh, I think the faster you can get to the point where, "No, I'm playing my game," and some people might and it's funny, people don't like it when you do that, right? A lot of people will get uncomfortable, but I think the sooner you can deal with that discomfort, like, there's a bit of a freedom that comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important though, like if 5,000,000 at 5 years, like if that's a personal goal that you decided on,
Yeah. Oh,
let's
yeah.
just be clear on that. Like those should be that should be your goal.
yeah,
Yeah,
And
that
if
should be
that like
serious.
and because I think goal setting is important where it's like, you know, for me it's they are arbitrary numbers, but sometimes I'll just throw something out there to have it stick to the wall. Where it's like, all
Oh,
right, you know what, for this year, let's shoot for this number. And then when we get to the end of the year, it's like, did we hit it? No. It's like, oh, what did we do wrong? Nothing. We just didn't hit that number. We hit a different number.
yep.
It's like
Yeah.
it's not that doesn't mean the world ends, the business stops. We go like it just means we ended up somewhere different. And and maybe we adjust our goal accordingly.
Yeah. I think Tyler was just saying that, um, there's these things that society puts out there
Total
is
no,
what you
no,
should have.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm clarifying, on the the sense of what you said earlier, Joe, is like talking about, there it is important to set goals.
y yeah, and I think, um, what's realistic is a dangerous kind of phrase,
Mhm.
and people get really uncomfortable. I had, like, a friend who's trying to figure out, he's kinda unhappy in his job or whatever, and I was really pushing him, like, "Well, what do you want your life to be like?" And I said, "Don't tell me what job you wanna have. Tell me what you want your life to be with. Like, do you want a job where you get to think big picture? Do you want a job that has a flexible schedule? Do you wanna like, what do you want your
Mhm.
life to look like?" And start working towards that. And, like, he couldn't get out of the, like, "Oh, well, that's easy for you to say, but, like, like,
It's not
there's no
realistic for
path for
me.
me to
Yeah.
have that right now."
Th
And I'm like, "No, I'm not saying you have to have it tomorrow."
Right.
But, like and he, like he I'm like, "Well, just tell me what you want." And he, like there was such a mental block that he couldn't even say something,
Yeah,
He couldn't even
I think what you just said, like the word realistic is dangerous because I think it oftentimes gets confused or used for what's easy. What's the easiest thing you could do? It's like I could just continue to go to my job and hate it. And that becomes the realistic thing where it's like,
Yeah.
what if you want, I want to make 7 figures a year. Well, that's unrealistic. Why is that unrealistic?
Yeah.
It's like I talk about things like that, with my core group, and they're like, that's unrealistic. You're in construction. It's like, what do I
For
can't,
2.
yeah. I was like, based on what? Like, you think I'm only gonna go to work and trade my time for money? It's like
Yep.
there's other ways I can create wealth for my family.
Yeah.
I want I agree. I've never heard someone say the word unrealistic is a dangerous phrase, but at the moment you said it, I 100% agree with it.
Yeah, and I think you get stuck in that framework, right? Because what's realistic? Oh, realistic is for me to go from a PM to a senior PM.
Right.
Like, that's realistic.
Right.
Alright, is
Why?
that what you want for your life?
Yeah.
Right? And I also think people think it means something else. Like, if I said 5 years ago, I would like to be able to work for myself on my own terms, that would be flexible, and I'd get to spend time in the middle of the day with m my kid and, you know, and choose to do, whatever. Someone would look at that and be like, "Well, that's unrealistic." Like, but you would just wanna, you know, casually work from home and, hang out with your kid and, take a walk during the middle of the day and then go decide to work later in the afternoon. Like, that's what I'm doing,
Right.
you know? But in the moment, if you hear it, it sounds ridiculous, right? Or it sounds unrealistic.
Right.
But, like I said, it's dangerous. What do you want? And start making decisions that put you in that
I think
direction.
if you're moving towards something that you want or kind of something that you believe in, it's much easier to find motivation to get you there as well, because
Mhm.
you have all, that motivation to get you there is all based on those beliefs and based on what you want rather than what somebody else is telling you. Like you said, if that's what you want to be doing in 5 years and you believe that you can make that happen, you're gonna find that motivation to get you there. Because realistically, at the end of the day, even motivation is completely arbitrary as far as like what motivates you. Is it numbers? Is it if I make this much in a year? Like that's just a made up number. It's not,
Mhm.
if I can get my YouTube channel to have this many views, like that motivation that you're making, it's a false narrative that you're building in your head to kind of get you going to get there. And you could make that be anything that you want. I feel like any sort of motivation, it's like you could tell yourself that it's a beautiful day out and you want to take the half, the second half the day off, and like you're just writing that narrative. That could be your motivation, but it's nothing. You're making that your motivation.
Mm.
Um where I think that,
But
if you're setting your goals and it's based on purpose and what you believe in and all of that stuff, you're going to have a far easier time motivating yourself than just kind of saying, well, I need to get here because this is where people want me to be. Where, you can now set these unrealistic goals and find motivation to get there, where it's because you want to make that happen, and you'll go to any length to make that happen.
yes, um, I think all that's correct. And then to kind of go back to, I think those goals of, 10,000 subscribers or whatever are good. It's something to shoot for. It's like a dollar value to shoot for. I think that's fine. I think enjoying what you do is the best motivation, though. Like, I enjoy doing the podcast, so it doesn't feel like work. But I know if I and I have a small audience. I go to a niche. I'm looking for people in Massachusetts that are in commercial construction. It's not a huge number, right? And I'm happy with my little 5 or 600 people that listen to every one. Yeah, maybe there's like I get excited to see one that hits, 12, 13, 1,500 or something like that on an episode, which is small. But uh, I'm fine with that. Like, that's great. It doesn't but I feel like if I was shooting for I have to have so many downloads or an episode or something like that, I feel like I would lose motivation on that.
Your
Um,
motivation would be different.
Yeah.
mm,
You know, you'd be focused on you'd be focused on something else.
But I think that be all I mean, even to kind of go back on your like your motivation for whatever you're doing is kind of whatever you say it is. Like if your motivation for your podcast
fair.
was to make money, it'd be a different story and you could potentially do both, but right now your motivation is just about enjoying it and that like that narrative that you're scripting for yourself, that's what gets you up, that's what gets you going, that's what gets you spending that day and a half each and every week doing that. And like that may change at some point, but that's because you're doing this podcast because it's something that you believe in and that you want to be doing. And I think that with that you can kind of script those motivations to be whatever you want them to be based on the situation and based on what you want. But if you were doing this podcast because somebody said you need to release this many podcasts in a year, like that's your motivation. Like I need to get to this number and there's, it's very hard to kind of establish those little goals and those little monuments to kind of move yourself up where it's just like it's just about a number at this point. And now like you
Mm,
don't have any motivation from yourself to get that done other than just to hit those numbers.
that's to validate to get outside approval,
Yeah,
right?
or if somebody was
Yeah.
like paying you, "Hey, if you release this many episodes, we'll give you this much money." And now like your motivation is just getting those episodes done to get paid that much money. And I think that like
Mhm,
at that point the podcast is for somebody else. It's about something else. It's
mm.
not based on the motivation of you, feeling content from doing it and being happy doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the joy from, I think it's amazing that the people that I get to talk to and learn from, it's just stunning. Guys that are running, $2 billion companies that are sitting down and, you know, talking to me how they did it, or somebody that's really good at some super niche category, or somebody that's into tech, and I get to hear about, like, what they're thinking about developing this new technology. Like, that's some motivation, and that makes it easy. But
Joe,
yeah, I think yeah,
what's the name of the podcast? Just so you can give a shout out on that.
the mass construction show. And it's funny, we ended up doing this because Anthony, DeBacchio,
Mhm.
it's funny story. The reason we're doing this joint one is because he messaged, he's like, "Hey," he's like, "Nick's been on your show, when are you
Oh,
going
really?
on there?" Yeah, and that's when, like, I said it to you or whatever, and you're like, "I'm down." Um, and he was a guy who was a residential builder,
Mhm.
carpenter, heard you, somehow, because he was listening to you, heard about me, started listening to my show. He left the residential side and is now a commercial superintendent. And he, like, vacillates back between the two of ours. And there's a few people out there that listen, like Matt Haskins, a guy out in Minnesota, listens to both of us. There's a few of them out there that I've heard from over the years. Um, and I think it's just by the nature of you and Johnny both being Massachusetts people, so you've got a little bit of that Massachusetts construction overlap.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the mass construction show about commercial construction, and I ended up talking every now and again about this mental health stuff, food, motivation, goal setting, that kind of thing.
How did that come like, how did the podcast come about for you? Like, leaving leaving the building inspector, becoming a code zoning, consultant, like, where'd the podcast come from?
So just being a podcast junkie myself, I felt like I learned so much about health, like the changes that I've made to my health from, like, a physical standpoint, lost 40 pounds, got rid of, like, blood sugar problems, all this other kind of stuff. I did that all by listening to that guy, Rob Wolf,
Mm.
Six Listeners Can't Be Wrong. Like, I learned about that. I learned about money. I learned about the Gabor Mates of the world, and I'm like, huh, there's so much for me to learn. I learned about inbound marketing, which I think was an amazing concept that, HubSpot really kind of coined the phrase. So I'm like, I've learned about marketing, I've learned about health, I've learned about all these things. I want to learn about construction. Like, I want to podcast about construction. And the residential space has people in it that were on podcasts or on TV or YouTube, but there was nobody in the commercial construction space that was putting out content.
Mhm.
There was I remember there was the construction tech trio, but every episode was about construction tech. And I'm like, yeah, I want to hear about that once in a while. I don't want to listen to that every week.
Mm.
Um, so I said, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to build the kind of podcast that I think would help people learn about construction. In turn, would help me learn about construction. And yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm thrilled that I did it. Haven't lost the energy for it yet. I know a lot of people get years into it and they kind of lose momentum. I don't feel like I'm losing momentum, and um, it's been a lot of fun. And I try not to, similar to you guys, I try not to have one particular topic. Like, we talk about wellness and construction. We talk about energy efficiency. Sometimes the CEO, how'd you start your business, or scheduling, or whatever the topic is. We kind of cover it. If it's commercial construction, mostly in Massachusetts, and I want to talk about it.
Mhm.
What I find interesting about that, I guess, aligns with what I find interesting about most podcasts when they're of a certain discipline, where the people and the guests that come onto the podcast, although they may all be from a specific discipline, it's kind of digging into life stories, and even wellness, or how they kind of became successful, what their day-to-day looks like at this point, where it's not necessarily about the discipline that they're on the podcast for in the first place, where it's like
Hmm.
you're just talking to somebody who's from within that industry, and they're giving you perspective on their life and kind of lessons that they've learned, and you're not necessarily just digging into construction or tool belt on or carpentry, um, where you're just talking to all these different personalities from within the industry. And I think that those conversations are far easier to sustain and go week to week without getting kind of burnt up on, where it's like the fifth week in a row and you're talking to somebody about how they started their business and how they've moved up the ranks and everything else, where it's like everyone has a different life story and has a different perspective on what life should look like, what wellness should look like, what mental health should look like, what success is. And I think
Hmm.
kind of, um, being that our podcast isn't necessarily interdisciplinary, which I feel like it could be, that is a lot of variation that we can get within our podcast, that, it's not the same thing week after week and it doesn't become so mundane.
Yeah, you don't get bored because the topic's always changing. And I kind of like it for the ability. I have this kind of theory that, I don't know if a theory is the right word, but I look at code and regulations as a guide about where the industry is going. So probably back when I was at the AGC, I started talking about mass timber and energy storage, because you were seeing code changes happening. There was never a energy storage standard, and the NFPA started to write NFPA 855 about battery storage. That was 7, 8 years ago they started that. Mass timber was just starting to make it into the code, and what happens with code when it gets written is either it's the industry saying, "Hey, we have this product that we are selling and creating, and our installers need a way, some guidelines about how to do it. You have to write code." So they'll lobby to get that, or the product is going in and building officials are saying, "Hey, somebody's putting batteries in their house to attach their solar panels to, and they're lithium ion. There's no rules. You need to give us rules." So it means that there's some movement happening there. So I was able to really learn about mass timber, learn about energy storage early on, and it's been really fun to see it take shape and have, people like, "Hey, I can't believe this. I started looking into this and now I'm seeing it happen here and there." Um, so I found that very exciting, and you can like look at things like zoning, um, you know, about additional dwelling units, size of units where they start changing zoning across the country, and density, and you can kind of see what's going to happen on the housing front there. And I like the opportunity to see those things, do a little research on them, and then talk about the podcast, and let people hear, hey, here's what I think is how this is gonna play out. And it's been fun to get a couple big wins on like the mass timber and the battery storage, energy storage, and so I'll mix it up. Sometimes do a solo podcast on topics like that, and I think that does keep it fresh. I think is what you guys are kind of alluding to. It makes it easier to kind of stick with.
Yeah, and I just think that that just because it's a construction podcast, doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have their own unique story that may have nothing to do with construction at all. And I think that a
Mm.
lot of times that makes for some of the most interesting podcasts that we have, where it's not just like, so really, tell me what you did after college. And then,
Yeah.
you swung a hammer for this long and then you work for so and so. And where, like, yeah, that's a different story, but it's all kind of the same story.
Mm.
Where
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear people, about their background, why they made the decisions that they do. Again, the motivations for doing so, and kind of dig into why, because it's also, a lot of people in our industry aren't necessarily making decisions to be in the industry based on making money. Um, you know,
Mm.
it's not like the most lucrative business to get. Nobody's grows up and is like, I want to be rich. I'm going to get into construction. Um,
Mm.
so the motivations for people getting into this are all different, and I think that those stories are also interesting because it's not just about money. It's not just because they were born into it. There's a lot of reasons why people get into it or why people get out of it that I find interesting as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there, and I'm not saying anybody found this one interesting, but this is a great example, right? We talked very little about construction. You know, it might be a fun thing. I'm sure you guys would probably have to wrap this up soon or want to wrap it up soon. But I did at one point, out of my own curiosity, I asked people, I'm like, hey, what other podcasts do you listen to? I always want to try and find new ones. And it was so interesting. I did it on Instagram and just get the responses that way. It was so interesting to see there was a ton of overlap where the people were listening to the same podcasts, and it wasn't what you would think. Like I kind of figured it'd be a bunch of construction podcasts.
Mhm.
And there were some people that listened to you guys and some other construction ones, and that fell into that bucket. There was a bunch of people that liked How I Built This by Guy Raz.
Mhm.
And then there was like the Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss. So it was like kind of business building, self-improvement, construction, and one other. They all kind of fit into these little buckets. And it was interesting to be like, oh, huh, those people that listen like it when the CEO is on and is talking about how Consigli went from $1 million to $2 billion.
Mhm.
They want to hear that story, or how Amo Fry started his business at 60 years old and is now doing like other people want to listen to hear themselves get better. So I think that would be an interesting thing for you guys to do, is to float what other podcasts do you listen to? If you're a listener of Modern Craftsman, what other podcasts do you listen to? And I think it would be very telling about why people listen to you, because it was shocking the amount of
Oh,
overlap.
I see what you're saying. Ask what okay. Ask what they're listening to outside of us
Yeah,
to
Yep.
understand what, like,
Why
why
they
they're
listen to
listening
you.
to us.
yeah.
Because
Alright, well,
why else?
let's throw that out now. So if you guys are listening to this, when you go to repost this episode on Monday, Modern Craftsman Monday, in it, make sure you tag Joe, Mass Construction, Is it Mass Construction on Instagram?
Yeah, Mass Dot Construction. Yep,
Mass
on
Construction.
Instagram.
But also tag or write within that screen capture what other podcast you guys are listening to. Give us
Mm.
3. If you don't have 3, give us how many you have, and,
Yeah,
and we'll
or maybe
we'll
even
repost that.
or even try a sticker. Because like, why else would there be all that overlap? I
Mm,
just assumed there was going to be a scatter of just all different things,
yeah,
and to just see the same podcast all hopping up, I was like, that's really like it's very interesting,
yeah.
and it was very telling.
It's the same. Like I look at the books I read, the audiobooks I listen to. It's like they're all on some sort of either self or business
Self
improvement.
improvement. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's like I'm listening to one right now about how to raise better children, and because my daughter is a very trying child, and so I'm listening to it, and I'm like, I really want to enjoy this. Like I really want to listen to it, enjoy it, and be like, man, I'm gonna be the best dad. And it's just really hard for me because it's like this isn't, like obviously I'm interested in being a good dad, but I'm not interested in learning how.
The topic.
Yeah, like the topic.
Yeah.
It's like so, but like I branch into those other things, and it's just like I just find myself coming back to the same, self and business improvement focused topics.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what your folks listen
Probably a
to,
bunch
and
of
if it
true
kind
I
crime.
was just gonna say
of. Oh, I remember what the fourth bucket was like spitting chiclets and just like sports
Barstool.
kind of,
Yeah,
yeah, like sports kind of just typical guy stuff. Because obviously my
yeah,
audience, just because the industry is going to skew much more male, so it was like the spitting chiclets, like sports barstool, construction, self improvement, and like building a
yeah.
company. They were all they fell into those 4 buckets, and there was no outliers. It was wild.
That's so
I
funny.
was
Yeah,
like,
well, let's do that, and then, like you said, maybe we'll do a sticker on the story and get some votes in, and we'll share that. Yeah, I never even thought of that
hmm,
because I don't know. I guess I just think everyone listens to this for the same exact
Nah, I
reason.
think everyone listens for different. It's not like maybe some people shut it off mid podcast. Some people on this one would be like, "What is this hippie shit that we're listening to right now?" Just want to
yeah,
dig into like
where'd they
business or
find
the
this guy? Yeah.
numbers. Um, everyone's different. I mean, I feel I tend to enjoy these podcasts more so than like talking about, setting up business systems where I'm just like, shoot me now.
Yep.
Um, it's just not what kind of gets me going and what drives me. And I'd rather, for me, that seems like topical conversation where I'd rather dig into more philosophical conversation with somebody where it's like, all right, I can kind of gauge who they are and why they're doing what they're doing and where they want to be. I find that to be more interesting for me. But everyone's
Mhm.
different. That's not right or wrong.
Yeah, agreed. I'll tell you 2 of the biggest, like, from a listens perspective was I had 2 project managers on, and I called the first one, like, becoming a superior project manager, and they just talked about how they set up their jobs, how they descope things, how they do this and do that. Not interesting to me at all. Like, I was interested, but not in my wheelhouse at all. But, like, people loved
Yeah.
it.
Mm,
Eat it up. So, like you're saying, how like some people like that. They just want that technical stuff and how to set up the spreadsheet and all that kind of stuff, and that's for them, and those episodes are for them. And I remember, like, one thing that and in perspective to put things in perspective, like, I'm super small, right? I don't have some huge audience. I'm not, an expert on this, but I remember listening to Tim Ferriss one time, and he said, "You can't make the podcast for everyone
mm-mm.
every time." He's like, "Sometime it's just gonna be for 20 people,
Right,
but if you make that for that 20 people, and they're the people that love that, they're now your people,
right.
and that's 20 people that are gonna be 100x about telling people about your show." So he said, "Don't do it for to try and meet the
Mm,
masses. Do it for what you find interesting and you're passionate about, and those people will come, and not everyone has to be for everybody."
right.
And I think that was really helpful for me because then I stopped worrying about what's gonna get the masses and just talk about kinda what's interesting, and it's been fun for me.
Yeah, I think that even, that comes down to what your motivation is for the podcast. And I think that, if you're shaping that around the idea of what everyone wants, that may make for a somewhat shitty podcast, because now you're just like all over the place, or you're disinterested in it, where it's like, hey, you know what, I'm going to shape this around what's interesting to me and the guests that I have on, and maybe that hits five different people on each podcast rather than like
Mm,
all 25 people one podcast. And I think that, the word will spread with those smaller numbers, and you'll have that overlap, and it'll kind of, it'll grow the way that it's meant to grow, and your motivations for doing so will kind of cultivate that podcast the way that it was meant to be. And for me, that just makes for a much more interesting listen.
yeah, I agree with you, and I think the easier route is to go after the bigger
Yeah.
names, and even not huge, right? Like, even just if there's someone that has a decent presence, then there've been a few people that, "Hey, I could get you this person on the show," and I'm like, "That's fine, but, I don't have anything to talk to that
Hmm.
person about."
Right.
Like, it's okay, yeah, because they have a big reach, and yes, if they tweet it out or share it on Instagram or on LinkedIn, that will get that episode a lot. That's like, yeah, I could do that a lot and try and capture a lot of downloads that way, but if I don't enjoy it and I don't feel like I have a conversation to have with that person, then um, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, the one big difference that I've met and I've spoken to Nick about, Nick does a much better job of driving conversation. If conversation's not there, it needs a direction to go. Where I feel like my engagement is typically, I'll like sit in the background. And if it's something I find interesting, I'll hop in or make some crass remarks. But I think that like such a big difference with guests is getting somebody on who is confident in themselves, doesn't mind kind of opening up and showing some of their flaws, mistakes that they've made, um, ways that they've looked to improve themselves, and getting somebody on who has enough experience to kind of speak confidently to what they've done over the years makes a huge difference. I think a lot of times you get guests on who are unsure on themselves or somewhat green, and they kind of want to pitch themselves the whole time. And it's like,
Mm,
we don't want you just to come on and pitch yourself. Like, we want to hear about everything. We want you to open up, tell about struggles that you've had, things that have helped you, things that haven't. And I think getting people on that are experienced and confident enough in themselves and their business to kind of let you in and see a side that you may not expect to see, has always been nice. And I think a lot of times that comes with older guests, or guests that, have been interviewed before, where they kind of understand the way that conversation goes. And
mm,
it's not, they don't have to be afraid of people seeing in.
mm. Yeah, no, that that's an interesting insight, and I should look for that myself with who I bring on
It's
because
it's hard, like, to
it's reflexive to wanna do
Yeah.
that, right? And I think, I don't want please remember your thought, Nick, but I would say this, like, you guys give so little direction on where this podcast is gonna go.
No,
Like,
he
and
texted
by
me
little direction, you mean
he
no
texted me
direction.
yesterday, he's
0.
like, "What are we talking about?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah, and what's funny is for my personality, I'm completely comfortable with that, but I
Same.
imagine you must have some guests that
Freak.
probably get the hives. Like, "Oh, what am I gonna talk about? I gotta like."
So, j
So,
that's
like
why, like, I hit record the moment I get on. Like, all that conversation while we were waiting for Tyler, that's all recorded, because the moment we started introducing at the beginning, it
mhm,
was like everything went out the window, and they were like, "I don't even know my name." It's like,
Yeah,
what you
pressure's
we
on
were
now.
just we were just chatting for 15 minutes, so we were like, "You know what? No more formal introduction, no more countdown, like, hit the record button, let the conversation flow," and by the time
mhm,
they realize it's recording, it's like they have their flow.
yeah. Yeah, I actually like unstructured. That's kinda like if I flip the camera around, if you saw my workspace, you'd be horrified, and if you saw my desktop, well, maybe not you, Nick, but, most project managers would be horrified if they saw my desktop. It's
Mhm.
just like it's not even in lines, it's just friggin' folders and files, like, all over the place, and, uh, I don't mind that, but I imagine folks must really wig out if they just gotta come in here cold turkey and just
But I think that's what
hit record.
like, exactly what Tyler said is, like, the only time we struggle is when someone isn't confident in who they are.
Yeah.
And then it's really difficult for us to pry that out because ideal like, we're supposed to be, you know, a sounding board and then like dissect what you said and question what you said and make sure that we're like pulling out all the nuggets and the tidbits and like reflecting back to the beginning of a conversation like that it's difficult when you know we've had guests on here where they do a poor job explaining who and what they are
Mm,
and and it's that's unfortunate because I know everyone has a good story to tell and some people just do a poor job at it.
yeah, well, some people just get nervous too. I mean, I've
Totally.
had
Yeah.
people that are, you know, running billion-dollar companies, and before we hit record, especially when we're in person, and they're like, "Oh, I'm nervous." I'm like, "What? We're in my
Yeah.
house."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't even have an office. Like, you're
Right.
in my house in my, like, office in the like, what's to be nervous about? But they're, like, wigging out,
Right.
and it's not just one person, it's lots of people,
Yeah.
it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, I think most people who really want it to be structured, like, I just feel as if you structure things, people plan for it, they account for it, and then you're not getting like a genuine story. Um, where
Yeah, you
like you can create whatever you want that story to look like if we hand you a list of things beforehand, and then it's like, well, that whole conversation seems shaped and forced, and that's not.
yeah, get in the elevator
Yeah,
pitch.
and like we get a lot of people on who want to do that anyway, and then we just take it like a completely different direction because it's like, no, we don't want to talk about that. Like if we want to talk about
Mm,
that, that's what we would have sent you. Um, and I think that the people that kind of shine in doing so are the people who are confident enough in themselves and what they've done, and they have a story to tell, and they're not ashamed of it, and it's not perfect, and they're not trying to kind of portray themselves as this perfect individual or company that makes no mistakes. It's like, hey, no, this is where we are. This is who we are.
yeah,
This is how we got here, and we're still making shit up.
yep, yeah, and, it's funny, the only thing I was a little apprehensive about is as we were talking, I was like, "We haven't said a damn thing about construction yet," other than the beginning when we were talking about, the super role and the building inspector stuff, but, so hopefully people enjoyed it though.
No, it's cool.
No, every like Tyler said, it's talking about construction is fine, but there's so much like every one of us, like we're all in construction, but I have many other interests, and I'm still interested in learning about other aspects,
Mm,
of how construction is related to my back pain,
mhm,
or how like my mindset, again, that's why I kept relating it back to your career. And it's like we're oftentimes forced to think that we can't do something, so we choose not to.
mhm.
Where it's like, you know, if you put your mind to it,
Do
as
anything.
cliche as that might sound, you truly have, every opportunity in front of you. And if you fail at it, you fail at
Mm,
it, but don't go into it thinking that you're gonna fail. Be
yeah,
Conor McGregor.
that's huge.
Be
Yep.
Conor McGregor.
You even look a little like Conor McGregor, so
You
it
know what? I
works.
used to get that when he wasn't as big, like when he
Yeah.
first came out, and I think I told this story on this podcast before. I was out with my wife one night, and I went to the bathroom, and this guy followed me in the bathroom, and he goes, "You Connor?" And I was like, I had no idea like what this guy was talking about. I'm like, "What? You Conor McGregor?" I'm like, "No, no, no." He goes, "You're Conor McGregor." I'm like, "I'm not Conor McGregor." He goes, "I'm gonna beat your ass." I was like, "Dude," I was like, "I'm not Conor McGregor, but if I was, I don't think you trying to fight a professional MMA
Yeah.
fighter is a good idea in the
Yeah,
bathroom here, because like
yeah,
that, like, and
that's hilarious.
I was like, "No," and he goes, "Yeah, you don't have the accent. Never mind," and he just walked away. But it was like, and then once he got big, then it was like, "No, you're obviously not Conor McGregor."
Yeah.
But
So I'm curious,
yeah,
just before we wrap, wh- what's the plan for the podcast for you guys?
I don't know.
What do you hope?
we don't.
What is
I
it?
don't
We've
know.
been. This is 4 years, right? I think it's been 4 years. Um, we don't know. It was just like honestly, the goal is to just continue to sit down and have really good conversations, more honest, open conversations about
Mm,
everything. Um, you know, and uncover some of the stories of craftsmen, craftswomen, people in this
mhm,
industry that have taken unique approaches to the industry, that have had unique experiences, that can, bring the technical value, but also bring the, emotional value. Um, the industry itself, I think, is, you know, in a I don't know if the right word, like a sensitive time in the sense like, there's so much innovation happening
mm,
and everyone is trying to hold on to the romantic side of construction while trying to ignore the innovative side. And I don't say
mm.
everyone, like there's a good portion of people that do, where it's like we should be encouraging both.
Yeah,
And if we can, if the modern craftsman can continue to have conversations on both sides of that fence and help drive the industry just to be, when we first started, it was to drive awareness to the industry as this is a good opportunity and a good career to be in. And I think that we've communicated that we're obviously making an impact, even in the small, even if it's a small one, but
absolutely. And not that small, but yes, absolutely.
but it can be bigger, right?
Mhm,
And I think that if we continue to have these open and real conversations, again, not just about building. Like it was never really intended to be all about home building or residential construction. It was supposed to be about craftsmanship.
mm.
And we've touched on that on both ends and both spectrums and everything in between. And I think that we just continue, you know, like I said, to have those conversations.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I would
interesting.
say I think right now, and we've kind of recently been reminded of this, that it's a landing spot for a lot of young men and women who kind of don't have a network to turn to within the industry. And maybe they want to commiserate, maybe they want to look for advice, maybe they want to hear what other people's stories are. So I think, that for us was kind of to get our story out there and then include people on conversations that we were having. Um, I think moving forward, the goal for the podcast would be to not structure things in a conversational way, but just make it um, more of a system. That like we show up, we do what we have to do, we get done what we have to do. We're not really flying by the seat of our pants. To be able to spend adequate time developing it and producing it, so that our time seems as though um, it's worth it for us, just because as you put a ton of time into this and going on,
Yes, you do.
4 or 5 years of doing it. Not that you're looking for anything as far as compensation or, a thank you or attention or whatever it may be, but we do want to streamline what we're doing and kind of maximize the time, maximize the efficiency of time that we're putting into the podcast, and I think kind of create some more professionalism within it. And just
Mhm.
make it as legit as possible, so that we feel we're setting a good example for the construction industry and kind of showing up with our best foot forward, and we can be the standard for the construction podcast to kind of uphold itself too.
Hmm. Let me know if you have what you have success with as far as the system side of things
Yeah.
and the making professional and limiting, because that's absolutely a challenge. Because I think probably part of the reason you guys are so successful is you're authentic and it's not
Yeah.
systematized, right? It's unique. And it's unique every time, and that's probably why people love it. Um, but it doesn't mean that you can't be better at the system side and the professional side. And So I'd be
Yeah, I
curious
think it's more
how
on the
you
back end too, where it's not anything that anyone's gonna see, but like on the back end, it's like, are you good for 3 today? Is Doug gonna get us this? What was, did you send the email for this?
Mhm,
Where it's just all of this coordination and correspondence, or hey, I can't be there till 3:45. Can't, today, even, hey Nick, I gotta run out at 3:45 to pick my girls up off the bus, where it's just like little things like that that you don't realize how much time and effort it takes. It's not just sitting down and recording. There's so much correspondence
I do.
before. Yeah, but like the
Yeah.
general
Yeah,
people
I'm
don't.
joking, yeah,
And so I think it's a
yep,
lot of that shit where it's like, hey, did Doug know? Doug didn't know that we recorded last week because we ran into an issue. Are we gonna? And it's not on the back end. It's not a machine that runs itself,
mhm,
and it would be nice, to be able to make a little bit of money to put people in place that they can help on that end, and we get to
mm,
show up and interview people and, spend some time with our family and not on trying to get a fucking podcast put together to release on Sunday night. So I think,
yeah,
it's more so on the
mm,
back end it wouldn't really make a difference. Nobody would see anything different or be less authentic. It's just like since day one, we've been boots on the ground trying to get this up and running. And it's like, let's put some people in place to help us with this rather than us doing all of this crap.
yeah. I was actually impressed with, like, the email thing that you guys send out where you can, like, pick a time and a date and what do
It
you wanna
only
talk
took
about,
3
Dude,
I
that
was
took
like
me,
years.
like yeah.
I was like, "Damn,
Finally, I was
these
like,
guys are
"Alright, that's
legit."
it. I gotta, like, this is so much work." We were, like, scheduling people last minute,
Yeah,
and
like day of.
I found that I think it's Acuity, no sponsorship, but, it's like a scheduling link, and I was like, "This is so much easier." And it's just like it completely like, "Hey, I wanna be on the podcast." "Great. You look like a good guest. Here's the link. Find a date that works for you." And it's
Yeah, and
like
even the stuff about, like, getting the
Yeah.
microphone, and I'm like
yeah,
I was like, "This is sharp. I
yeah.
should be doing this." And don't you have, like, an upload for image, photo, and
Yep.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
headshot and all I was like,
Dude, copy it.
"I need."
Just copy, control C, control V, man.
But I mean, if
Yeah,
this were our only job, I mean, I wouldn't even consider it a job, but if this was like what we did, that'd be one thing, but we
Mhm.
have actual jobs where it's like as
Yes.
little supplemental effort that we have to put into this on top of
Mhm.
what we're, actually sitting here doing would be lovely.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, the less effort, the
Yeah.
better.
For this, yeah,
Yeah.
like, we want all our effort into the guest, the
Mhm.
conversation, and whatever we can automate beyond that is good.
Yeah. And it's wild, Tyler, when you said, it's funny, I'm enjoying this conversation. I Tyler, by the way, very like, I've enjoyed meeting you. I know Nick, and I like Nick, and you know, obviously never met you, but, this has been great. I've enjoyed meeting you. But, um, you talked about, like, not looking for, like, a thank you or anything or whatever, but I would say it's funny, Anchor, which I publish on, allows
Mhm.
for people to make donations, and I think I have 4 people that donate, but even, like, the first one, like, it's, like, $5 a month or $10 a month that the people give. I get one person that does that and says, "I wanna give you $5 a month because I like your
Yeah.
podcast that much." That is better than, you know, because my numbers aren't that huge, but getting a, like, 10 or $20,000 project
Yeah.
coming my way. Like, it feels
It does.
fantastic.
It I think that, that definitely is part of it, and, like, the reassurance and hearing that or hearing somebody's story, I'm not discounting that at all. It's
Mm,
just, like, our primary reason for doing it, like, I'm sure the same as you, is not to get that, Like, that's a
right.
bonus, that's a benefit, that's
Yeah.
amazing, and a lot of times, if it's one of those days where you're like, "I just don't feel like doing it today," and then, like, that pops up, you're like, "No, I'm good."
Yep.
That definitely helps when you're in the thick of it. But that wasn't ever, even sponsorships, that was never our motivating factor for doing this. Like, it's never been to make money or anything else. It's never been for a thank you. It's never been It's kind of just been a lot of people have reached out and told us that it's helpful, and we've realized that we do kind of have a responsibility to people.
Mhm.
That they've invested and we've been a part of their lives for 4 years at this point. And so it's kind of continuing along that path, and see how long we can ride it out
Yeah.
for. I wish that there was like this one thing that we were
Plan.
working towards, right? But it's
Mhm.
always shifting and it's always changing and life's always changing. So I think we're just kind of adapting some and looking to make things as seamless as possible.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you guys old and gray and, still plugging
Yeah,
away.
probably sooner than later.
I think I get gray in the beard. Well, Joe, those that can, just a
Mm.
reminder, where can they find your podcast and Instagram?
Yeah, everywhere, Mass Construction Show, uh, Mass Dot Construction on Instagram, and to be honest, probably most of my content, because I'm on the commercial side, is LinkedIn,
LinkedIn. Okay.
and that's where so if you just look up Joseph Kelly on LinkedIn, Mass Construction, that's where I'm putting out.
And we didn't really get into what you do from a consultant standpoint, but if they're local, or what's your clientele base?
Yeah, it's general contractors that, more and more on the residential side, it actually has been happening. They're not really the core of my business, but NFPA 241 plans,
Mhm.
which are construction fire safety plans, which are a requirement here in Massachusetts. I write a lot of those. I write construction management plans, which are transportation plans, um, and then general building and zoning code analysis. Usually, the stuff Nick is either texting or calling me about in a panic.
Hey,
Um,
don't tell everyone it's a panic. I got
the
my
bat
shit
phone.
together, man.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, then you might be excited to hear. So, in the new year, Mike Yanovich is joining me. Do you know Mike?
I don't know.
He was a building inspector with me in Boston.
Okay.
He's a commissioner now in Walpole.
Okay.
He was
Oh,
an
oh, yeah, yeah, okay. I know, I
assistant
definitely
commissioner.
know the name.
Yeah, if you saw him, you'd
Yep.
know him. He was also assistant commissioner in Brookline.
Mhm.
He's really dialed in on Brookline zoning in particular. That was his niche there. Um,
Just send
so
me his text number so I can have him on, speed dial.
You gotta come through me, Nick. You're
Alright,
gonna be
fine. Hey, Joe, I need, an answer for yesterday. I was just wondering if you could get that plan over to me.
Maybe if you go and
Yeah.
hop and leave Joe
Thank you.
some donations.
Isn't
Oh.
it? Oh, yeah. That's what I meant.
Yeah, those 4 people, none of them say Nick Schiffer on them, you
Everyone
know?
knows building inspectors take bribes, right?
Online bribes now. We have an,
Yeah, a
yeah,
portal for it.
yes.
It's like, if you tip me, I'll come out today. If you don't, then,
Yeah.
you gotta come in the office
It
and
just has
reschedule
to,
for me.
the one conundrum is it has to go through my podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for 19.95 a month, Nick, you can find out whether you need to sprinkle that, condo
Yeah.
or not. Yeah.
Alright, Joe, I appreciate you
Awesome.
being on, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah,
Thank you. It was nice to meet
great.
you.
Absolutely. Yeah, Tyler, very nice to meet you. Nick, as always,
Take
good to see
care,
you.
man.
Alright, take care, guys.
Joe's a cool dude. I don't I think I alluded to it, but I met him when I was in commercial construction, and he was the building inspector. And at the time, like, I didn't we talked about a couple of episodes ago, like, I was nervous about building inspectors, and he would come out and we just walk the job, and I'm like, "You have to inspect anything?" He goes, "No." I'm like "What do you mean?" He goes, "This is a high rise, man. Like, this is all
Yeah.
affidavit stuff. Like, engineers are signing off. I'm just out here to just, like, keep an eye on things, make sure it's going as it seems."
Yeah.
And he was just always super nice. And I was like, this is not what I was
Yeah.
told." Like, um, but yeah, I definitely text him last minute. I'm like, "Hey, so, we're supposed to weld in this building tomorrow. Can you give me a 241 plan?"
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's like, "You know that," I'm like, I know. I'll come on the podcast again." He's like, "Well, you're already doing that." I'm like, "I know, what do I gotta do?" But
No,
I think
he seems like a cool guy. It's funny because I wanna say he, like, doesn't seem like a building inspector, but I also do know quite a few building inspectors who I feel like if they weren't on the job would have a very similar personality to him.
mm, yeah, I think it's just, the mindset around, like, So this is a great, follow-up to our conversation at LBM, like, there's another opportunity to be in the construction
Yeah.
industry, and he's got a flexible schedule. He's at home gardening with his son at 11 a.m.,
Yeah.
but he's consulting for construction. It's just it's such a wide net. We had one not so great review, so I'm not gonna
Ooh,
read it, but it was, they just said that we were condescending in tone, and if, we only believe in people that have the same business plans as us. Said not impressed, so whatever.
damn.
That was supposed to come through our, Survey Monkey. It didn't. Oh, well. But Tuesday, we got one that said, "I appreciate you guys' honesty very much," and asked when the Essential Craftsman is coming on the show. So I'm fairly certain I reached out to them. You know what? Let's just look this up live right now because I was in
I
the
think he
middle of
has
posting.
his own podcast.
He does. Well, he's got an awesome YouTube
YouTube, yeah.
channel. Oh, shoot. So they did they did reply. God bless you.
Thank you.
They did. So I actually owe them an email. Um Man, he said let's shoot for September. So I'm a little late. So let me follow up with him. So we'll get him on
S
the
Wait, this past September?
Yes,
Oh, we missed
Tyler.
that.
I reached out in August. So we'll get him scheduled. And then we got another one. Thank you, longtime listener. Love the show. Listen to work at work every week. It's refreshing to hear your perspective stories and realize I'm not the only one in the quote unquote boat. We all have our successes and struggles. Keep it real. Cool. All right, man. We're signing out.
I guess so. I was just thinking about how he's not very essential.
The Essential
Oh,
Craftsman.
I thought when you responded to that, I thought that like you had read that review and you're like, screw it, I'll just email them right now. Like it was something that you had recently done.
Oh, you're saying I didn't consider him essential.
Yeah.
Well,
And then it
you know,
was from August. And I was like,
my
when you
bad.
said that, I was like, wait, September? It's almost
It's
January. It's
yeah,
like he's
it's
talking
not.
about for next September. Like he
You
can't have
know,
that much going on.
my mistake. Well, guys, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork. So we were out at the LBM Expo a couple weeks ago. Tyler had met Keith
Who I
for the
didn't know
first
was
time.
Keith. I was like,
You
who
didn't
is
know it was
no, I
Keith
was like, who is this guy coming up to me shaking my hand?
with the snazzy jacket on.
Yeah, man.
Well, if you guys don't know who Duration Molding and Millwork is, they deal with all of the Boral True Exterior products, fly ash material, and they mold and shape and cut this stuff into literally any profile. An architect actually reached out to me yesterday and sent me an email and saying, "Nick, do you know of a good exterior trim product? We're having difficulties getting um, a cedar product that we typically spec." And I had mentioned the True Exterior stuff, and he was familiar with it. And then I kicked him the Duration Molding and Millwork website, durationmillwork.com. And he wrote back, he goes, "Man, I had no idea that there was a company that made this stuff into any
Yeah.
profile. This is a game changer."
Yeah, it's I think the interesting thing about it too is that, technically it would be a synthetic product. It's
Mm,
not like real wood, but I feel like that's what a lot of people think of, when they hear it, that it's going to be like a hardy siding or it's going to be, even like you think synthetic decking or something like that, where it's actually not at all. Like it's very close to wood, except you have obviously better wear trades characteristics, but it finishes like wood and everything else. And what they can do with it as far as custom profiles and whatever milling, shaping you need done, there's nobody else doing that.
no one. Also brought to you by the guys over at Reno Run. Guys, if you don't know about we forgot the burnout. I think we are gonna
We
do
need like
a
a
beep beep though.
yeah, I want like a van door sliding and slamming shut too,
Oh,
like
that's a
the old
great
van
that
doors.
dude. That's a great. What the hell is it called? A Sonic brand.
Yeah,
That's what they're called. A van door sliding shut, or the two doors in the back. Boom, boom.
yeah, gotta
I
work
like
on
that.
that.
Well, Reno Run is a product delivery program. Program's not a great
Company?
word. Company. So on your computer, on your phone, if you need product delivered, building materials, whether it's last minute, a box of screws, or a big order that you got to take off for and you need delivered to the job site, Rental Run's got you covered. If you guys want some free shipping, hit the podcast dot I'm sorry. Yeah, podcast.rentalrun/Modern Craftsman. Sign you up for free delivery and check out what they have to offer.
Yeah, give it a try. Why not? Try it. If it makes your life easier, hang on to it. If it doesn't, keep running and wasting your time, you know?
Yeah, 3 hours
But at least
at the
at
big
least give it
box
a
store.
shot, and then it looks good on us, we're bringing value to our sponsors. So, you're giving back to us,
Ooh, I like that.
right?
And you can also give back to us by hitting iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review and let us know what we're doing good. And if you don't like it, hit the link in the Survey Monkey on our Instagram.
Yeah,
See you guys next week.
don't go on there and leave crappy reviews.
That's mean.
It's annoying. We
So
don't like
mean.
your business model. None of us have the same business model.